My name is Lauren Hollows from NOI Education Services, and today we are continuing with our Working in the Wild series. So this is a series all about running a business, family, and homeschooling from the road. And today we're going to be talking about homeschooling. So I've now been homeschooling. I've got a 16-year-old and a 10-year-old, and I've been homeschooling them now for about a year for my 10-year-old. Well, since June last year for my 10-year-old. We started from term 3, and my 16-year-old, we actually pulled him out early in term 1 because of a couple of other issues. And so he's been homeschooling now for almost coming up on 2 years. So I wanted to talk a little bit about homeschooling because I think there are a lot of misnomers in and around, quality of education, possibilities, how it works, things like that. There is still, it really is it does vary a lot state by state. So depending on the state that you're in, and depending on the country that you're in, it does change substantially in relationship to, I guess, how you're expected to run it, what your options are, et cetera, et cetera. So my kids, we obviously started out in WA. So the process for us was reporting formally to the Department of Education and applying for homeschooling. Within that application, basically had to say, kind of give it a really high level overview as to how we were going to run the program. That definitely changed once I started homeschooling in relationship to, I guess, how I wanted to run it, what resources we were using. There was a lot of different aspects of that did change once I actually started getting into it. So that was basically the process for us. In the lead up to it, I did do a little bit of, obviously I did a lot of research, looking at different programs that were available out there. There are a huge amount of programs that are available out there. I strongly recommend that if it is something that you're going to think about doing, it's worthwhile looking into, the different types of programs that are available, what's going to work for your kids in particular. And also just be open to the idea of changing it. Now, for those of you that are watching this and working in vocational education and training, basically the process is going to boil down to being able to create like a really high level mapping guide of, here's the criteria from the curriculum. And then this is what you're going to do in order to support some sort of evidence of it. Nowhere near to the extent of principles of assessment, rules of evidence. But basically what I do is I just put together like a mapping guide of the curriculum every 6 months. I map what we've done, what areas we've covered. I'll adapt it then for, the areas that I see where we haven't covered it as much, where there may be some gaps. And then I submit all of that through to the Department of Education. And then once a year, we have an annual review. It's always gone really smoothly. As I said, it basically boils down to being able to create a really high level mapping guide. It's a cakewalk, I think, for probably most people that work in vocational education and training. For people that have never done a mapping guide before, who may not be educators, the process can be a little bit more complicated. But, by all means, like if it is something that you're thinking of doing and you don't know how to do this, I may actually end up putting up a video on how I go about creating my my mapping guides for my reporting every term. But that's kind of basically how we run it. The biggest question I probably get in relationship to homeschooling is how long does it take? So again, my kids are 10 and 16. I probably spend around about an hour with them each day on it. A lot of that they are now able to do themselves. It was probably a little bit more intensive in the beginning. And I'll go into the reasons for that, but I honestly believe that you can do it in about an hour a day. Now, the reason for that is that it's highly tailored curriculum. You're working one-on-one with your students. And that basically means at the moment that they have a question, you're able to answer it. So there's not that kind of waiting lag time. The learning is highly contextualized to them. So they're picking up on topics a lot quicker. So I'll give an example of this. So when COVID hit, and that was kind of the impetus for us. When COVID hit, my youngest son, he was in year 1. We knew he had he was dyslexic. He was very, very far behind in relationship to reading, and being able to like even recognizing letters. Went and found a program that I knew was designed to teach reading for dyslexic students. And I think within 6 weeks, he went from being able to recognize 6 letters to being able to read short words. He obviously then went back into the school system. So we managed to catch him up in like the term and a half that he was off for the 2 terms that he was off for with COVID. With the lockdowns in 2020. But when we first started this program, he was like a very reluctant reader. He could read maybe a sentence or two. It was still very taxing on him mentally. He would get headaches after reading for more than about 10 minutes. Now he reads, I think he's read like 50 or 60 books this year. Like if I let him, he would go through 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 books a week. You know, books is probably our number 1 expense, like educationally speaking. Both of my boys are avid readers. But you know, the youngest, as I said, he went from being dyslexic and not being able to read for more than about 10 minutes, and he probably reads for 2 hours a day now without any issues. And a lot of that was just, you know, going back to some of those basic techniques, contextualizing specifically for that learner. And, you know, he just absolutely flourished with it. In the last 14 months, he's done all of year 5. He finished off his year 4 curriculum. He did year 5. And I think yesterday he finished his year 6 curriculum. He's now going on to year 7 curriculum. My 16-year-old went from being a C student, you know, CB kind of a student as an average. He's just been accepted into his first uni course in November. So, and that's basically working on that kind of hour a day principle. Now, obviously, in addition to that, we do things like we've taught financial literacy, because I think that that's very, very important. Both the boys have got responsibilities for cleaning, for contributing to the household, you know, doing dishes, helping with the cooking. My 16-year-old son does almost all of our laundry. So there's a lot of life skills that we pack into that. And we are also, we are active as well. So, you know, a couple of times a week, we will go and we will, you know, go on a walk through a jungle. We will hike a mountain. You know, there's a lot of physical stuff there. My 16-year-old, anytime we're in a town, like we're in Cairns at the moment, he will go to the gym for an hour a day. So I think there's a lot of learning that happens in and around outside of that. So the PE aspect is like lots of swimming and lots of hiking and, you know, those sorts of tasks. We go to museums. That's obviously, you know, it's not part of our like that formal hour a day, but that forms part of their education as well. There's just a lot of discussions that happen like as we're driving in the car. You know, I do trivia with them. We see signs, you know, we talk about components, like we do try and let the boys do you know, like listening to podcasts and things like that, and topics naturally come up through that. So I think there's a lot of innate learning that happens. And when your kid is not forced to do 6 hours a day in a incredibly structured environment that may actually not be well suited to them, as hard as teachers work, you cannot cater a curriculum to 30. You can't individually cater curriculum to 30 students, to 40 students. It's just not something that's possible. The freedom that you have when you literally have a class of 2, 3, 4, and you're able to cater specifically to their needs, the growth that you see that comes out of that process is absolutely incredible. So you know, with my older son, he had never been taught math. Like the basics of math were like just not there. They were non-existent. So we actually started, you know, in year 9 with basic maths of like, okay, let's just rote learn our multiplication tables, because they don't do rote learning in a lot of cases anymore. So we rote learn the times tables, and then from there we had to build everything up from that. Now he's managed to do that year 7 to year 10 curriculum in the last 18 months. But I think, like, we just barely caught him at that tail end, where, like, if I hadn't caught him at that point in time, he honestly probably would have gone through grade 12 not knowing his multiplication timetables. And he, as I said, he was a BC student, so that was well past passing. And yet, it made everything so much harder in relationship to, like, now we're obviously into algebra and things like that. When you don't have some of those basics, it makes the rest of the learning process so much harder. So I think that it's one of these things that if you have an opportunity, like if there is any way that you can work your family arrangement, that you can, do work from home, or that you can, maybe between you and your husband, like you can get 2 days a week from home and your husband can get 2 days a week from home. If you can organize your relationship, if you can organize your family in any way that even just for one term, you can homeschool your kids, especially if you have that educational background, like you're in vet, it is an absolutely invaluable experience. And it will, again, like I don't fault the education system for this, but I will say our education system is absolutely broken, because we are not allowed to fail kids anymore. And what that means is that those fundamentals, like recognizing numbers, being able to read, rote learning your maths timetables, kids are just being passed from grade to grade to grade to grade. And teachers actually don't have the capacity, like no matter how well intentioned you are, again, if you have 40 kids in your class and you've got a curriculum that you've got to stick to, that's not going to meet the needs of the vast majority of those kids. The only way that you as a parent are going to ensure that is that I do feel that you need to pull your kids out and do a check on them yourselves. And you'd be amazed at what you can achieve in a term. Like, as I said, we took one of our sons from not being able to read to being able to read full sentences in one term. Because we had a following term, we then took him from being like a kid who did not read, who hated reading, who actually got headaches reading, to being an avid reader. With my other son, as I said, we took him from not having that basis of mathematics to now being really quite good at mathematics. And I, definitely by the time that he finishes his year 10, he's absolutely going to be where he should be, based on where the curriculum says that they should be. And I think that this is the reason why the vast majority of our kids, I think one of the shocks that parents will find is, no matter how good an education, and I mean, our older son was going to private school, no matter how good the education is that you're paying for them, you're never going to be able to give them that contextualized education, because there's that limiting factor of one teacher, 30 to 40 students in a classroom. And it's not physically possible to actually properly tailor the curriculum for every one of those students. And the higher up they go in their years, the more key components they miss. And so therefore the students just have to come up with their own coping strategies. So, if and I think if you can get them in like year 3 or 4, if you can pull them out at that point, I think years 3 to 5 is probably like your most crucial time, because that's when we're getting so many of those bedmark, like those really foundational learning skills down. If you can pull them out at that point, with teenagers, it's a huge opportunity, because it actually gives you the opportunity to, one, identify and really quickly gap fill, and teenagers will pull that sort of stuff together a lot more quickly, but then also give them the opportunity to pursue and identify their own passions as well. All kids, I do believe all kids are inherently naturally curious. They are natural learners. They are not natural learners in an environment of 30 kids. It's very, very exhausting for them. And that's why our kids come home every day from school and don't want to talk about anything, because they're just tired. Like, they've had to come up with their and apply their own coping strategies for 6 hours. No matter how good their teacher is, they've maybe gotten, 15 minutes of quality time being educated individually and contextually from that trainer, from that teacher, because the rest of the time, the teachers are having to deal with like the problematic students who are acting up, or just trying to get through the curriculum as a whole, or like it's the way that the school system has been set up at the moment, like with the numbers that where schools deal with, is just not physically possible to provide the education that they deserve. Now AI is going to make a big impact on that moving forward in the future, but we're definitely not there yet. Most schools don't have access to that technology yet. And so, if, as I said, if you can pull your kids out of school, even for a couple of months, and put them into that environment where you can, really cater the curriculum to them and to their needs, 100% do it. Like, do it. Don't hesitate. If you get pushback from it, ignore it. Even I, as an educator, got pushback from family. I got it from friends as to like, what, like, how are you going to manage this? And, what about their friends from school, and what about their social systems and everything like that? Now everyone turns around and says to me, like, it was the best decision that you ever made. We can see how far the boys have come. And as I said, we get to teach all of these things, like all of these life lessons, as part of that. Like, my kids know about credit, they know about interest, they know about taxes, they understand, they know how to cook for themselves, they know how to clean, they know how to do laundry. All of these really important life skills that unfortunately we aren't teaching in schools, and that's because we can't even get like some of these basics down, because we're dealing with like a 1 on 40 sort of a situation. So that's just a little bit about kind of how we homeschool. As I said, we focus on about an hour a day of kind of bedrock schooling, which is, your maths, your English, a bit of history. We have maths and English every single day, and then we weave other things in throughout the week. So that might be science, that might be history, that might be HAS. Sometimes that's covered through going to different places like museums and things like that. Other times it's, like watching documentaries, and then doing an essay on it. It might be through reading particular books and stuff like that. So we've got a range of strategies that we utilize for that. But yeah, that's a little bit about how I homeschool. If you guys have got any questions in and around homeschooling, in and around like how you develop a curriculum, please put them all below. I'm more than happy to do like a whole bunch of episodes on setting up homeschooling for your kids, how it works, what you should be doing, what are some of the things that you shouldn't be doing, how to create that kind of base mapping document, all of that sort of stuff. And yeah, we will go from there. Otherwise, thank you very much, guys. My name is Lauren Hollows. This is our Working in the Wild series. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you next time around.